Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Today is going to be our second video on the process, the chemical reaction of photosynthesis. In the previous video, we talked a little bit about the reactants and the products, kind of the overall reaction here, and the main goal about creating that glucose so we can have that stored chemical energy that eventually we can use cellular respiration to use for usable energy. Today, what I want to do real quick is well, not real quick. Today's going to be a tougher one. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about the details of what is actually happening in that chemical reaction. All right, and it's actually made up of a series of chemical reactions. And I'm kind of going to go halfway there in the fact that if you take higher level biologies, you will go into more detail of this. I'm going to kind of take you part of the way there. So this video is going to be a little challenging. All right. So just kind of a heads up going forward, you might have to pause, rewind. I'm going to do my best to kind of take my time and kind of explain things, all right? So first things first, we know, right, from the last video that photosynthesis takes place at the chloroplasts, all right? It takes place in the chloroplast. So that's where we're going to start right now. I have my chloroplast right here, kind of, it's kind of almost a disc shape, and I cut it in half so that we can look inside the chloroplast here, all right? Now, inside the chloroplast, all right, there's two major parts. There are these almost like little membranes inside that they stack on top of each other. They almost kind of look like pancakes, all right? These pancake stacks on top of each other there, these are called the thylakoids. And I only drew two stacks there. The chloroplast is filled with these stacks of pancakes, or what we call the thylakoids. All right, these thylakoids are very, very important because they contain something that's is crucial for this reaction, and they contain chlorophyll. Which we said in the last video, chlorophyll is the pigment that is responsible for absorbing the light energy that is necessary to make this reaction happen. All right, so we have our thylakoids that are filled with chlorophyll, all right, which I said are kind of like pancakes. And then in the area kind of around the pancakes, all right, it's kind of almost like this thick syrup. It fits the analogy very well. All right, it's kind of like this thick syrup called the stroma. All right, so we have the chloroplasts, we have the thylakoids with chlorophyll, and then surrounding all around it is the stroma. All right, and that's very important because now we're going to talk about the two parts of the reaction that make the overall reaction of photosynthesis possible. All right, it's not just water, it's not just carbon dioxide. There's actually multiple players going on here. And even when I talk about this, there are several enzymes that I'm not mentioning here to try and to kind of help, even though this is a little challenging, to keep this a little bit basic. All right, and this first one that we're going to talk about is what we call the light-dependent reaction. All right, so there's two reactions we're going to talk about here. All right, this one is called the light-dependent reaction. All right, and this reaction takes place in the thylakoid. All right, this reaction takes place in the thylakoids. All right, now it's called light dependent because this reaction is dependent on light energy. This reaction only happens because of light energy. All right, so we know that light energy is going to come in, and it's going to be absorbed by chlorophyll. So that light energy is absorbed by that molecule chlorophyll. All right, so we're going to take that light energy, and one of the other things that's going to happen when we go into this here, into those thylakoids, is water. Water is going to be absorbed in those thylakoids as well. All right, so into the thylakoids, we have water and light energy. So we have our light energy. Plus our water. All right, plus another molecule. All right, and this one kind of acts as like a middleman in the fact of it's not in our final reaction, but it's a necessary molecule, and it's a very complex molecule. All right, it is known as NADP or NADP. Actually has a plus sign because it's a positive charge at this moment. All right, NADP. What you need to know about NADP is it is a molecule, is what we call a, it is a proton carrier, all right? And basically what it does is it helps move electrons from one area to another. Remember, these aren't animate objects. They aren't picking up and walking around. This is all chemistry that's happening here, which means we need positive and negative charges to kind of be pulling and repelling each other to make things move around, all right? So that's our reactants there. Our products end up being, all right, at the end of here, all right, we have in the thylakoids, this light activation energy is going to start chopping up these waters, all right, and what it's going to create is oxygen, all right, it's going to create oxygen. It's actually going to create a little bit of ATP. All right, and now remember the law of conservation. If I start with oxygens, all right, or I'm sorry, if I start with hydrogen and oxygen, I have oxygen over here. That hydrogen is actually going to attach to the NADP and become NADPH. All right, so that's what we have so far. All right, that's our first reaction here. All right, is we have something called, or we have light energy that's breaking up these waters, all right, and that's attaching the hydrogens to the NADPs and leaving us oxygen, and it actually recharges a very few amount of ATPs. Now, the whole purpose of photosynthesis is not to create ATPs. These ATPs are then going to be used to do our second reaction. All right, so here's our second reaction. Our second reaction, instead of a light-dependent reaction where we have to have light energy, this second one is sometimes called the dark reaction, because this one is what we call light independent. This reaction can happen without light energy to do it. So now we have our light independent reaction. And this one happens in the stroma, that syrup-like material around the thylakoids. All right? So in this reaction here, we are going to take actually some of the things that we took over here. All right? So in this one here, we had water and light energy come in, and we had come out is oxygen. All right? So we released our oxygen there. All right? In this reaction here, we're going to take that ATP that we just made and that NADPH, all right? So we're going to take that NADPH plus that ATP, and we're also going to add to it this time our carbon dioxide. All right, and so we're going to take these things here, or these reactants, and we're going to create some products. All right. Now, this reaction here that's happening, all right, is happening in the stroma. There's a whole bunch of enzymes moving around electrons and protons, all right, that's happening in the stroma, right? In kind of a cycle-like formation, and this is what we call the Calvin cycle. All right, the Calvin cycle, so this is also known as the Calvin cycle. All right, and what's happening here is we are bringing in that ATP and the NADPH, right? That's coming from the thylakoids. It's coming into this reaction. There's our NADPH and our ATPs. So we're making those things, and then we're using them right away. All right. Also coming into this reaction is our carbon dioxide, which we come in through the stroma. I'm sorry, through the stomata. We got our carbon dioxide going into the Calvin cycle. So we have three things going into there, and we're going to have coming out of it. All right. Now we have all the things. We have carrying all these we have our carbons, we have our oxygens. We're carrying a bunch of our hydrogens, which we got from our waters. We're carrying them around, and now we need to form new bonds. To form new bonds, we need energy. So this ATP we created over here was the energy we're going to need to combine these carbons, oxygens, and hydrogens to make our actual glucose. All right. So from here, we're going to create our glucose. C6H12O6. That's our glucose. All right. To be able to do that. All right. So we have all this stuff going in, and what we have coming out. All right. Showing glucose. Now that glucose can actually stay either in the chloroplast into the plant cell, or it might go out of the plant cell. All right. Whew. Okay. Last thing here. So we kind of had some canceling out going here. All right. Because think about this. Yes, or sorry, one other thing we forgot to add here. All right, those hydrogens are taken off of here, and so what we're left with also is the leftover NADP back to where we started. Sorry. All right, so now we have our reactions here. All right. There's our Na. I want to stay consistent with my color scheme going here of reactants and products. All right. We had that we created that, we needed that NADPH or NADP, right? And we created NADPH, but then we used it right away. And we created ATP, but then we used it right away. And we started with an NADP, but we also ended with one as well. So we have a lot of things that kind of cancel each other out. If I'm kind of looking at this as kind of two sides of a reaction here, all right? I kind of have stuff canceling out because I have this one here on this side and on this side. They kind of cancel each other out, right? I created an ATP, but then I used it right away. I created an NADPH, but then I used it right away. All right? And so we kind of have some leftover pieces, and we end up with our overall reaction here. All right? When we think about what we take in, we have light energy, all right, which we know is the activation energy. I'm looking at all of the reactants. All right, all of our reactants here. In this first one, we have water still. Oops. I don't want to do that in black. I want to do that in blue or purple. Purple for reactants. All right. We have some reactants on this one here. We have carbon dioxide. And we ended up with the products. Let's see, products on this side, we ended up with oxygen and glucose. All right. Law of conservation says that we have to balance this reaction, right? If I start with this many of this, and we did that in our last video, we know it's actually 6 oxygens and 6 carbon dioxides make 6 oxygens and 1 glucose. You don't have to put a 1 there if there's just a 1. So here's our final reaction. But we had to do a lot of work to get there. All right. Now, I know this looks very confusing, but the idea is to try and follow along all the way. All right. So we had 2 reactions here. We had the light-dependent reaction where we needed light in the thylakoids, the light-independent reaction, or also known as the Kelvin cycle in the stroma. The idea is that we had a lot of things. We had to use a lot of middlemen to get there. All right. Things I expect you to know. All right. What's the difference between the 2 reactions? All right. Where do each of the reactions take place? What's the difference between them? Light-dependent requires light energy, and it happens in the thylakoids. Those thylakoids contain chlorophyll that absorbs that light energy. Right? Light-independent reaction, also known as the Kelvin cycle, takes place in the stroma, and its job is to take that CO2 and turn it into glucose. All right? So, that's kind of a lot there, and this is a long video here, so this is a tough one. I warned you guys ahead of time. All right? So it's a tough one there. You might have to take a little decompress. We'll spend some time together talking about it, hopefully in class. So, all right, thank you very much. Good luck, and may the science be with you.